Look, I need to ask you something, not a philosophical question. Not one of those motivational phrases you scroll past on social media. A real question. How many times today have you already lost your peace over something that, when you stop and think about it clearly, had absolutely no power over you? An unanswered message. A comment from someone who barely knows you. A plan that didn't go the way you wanted. Traffic, a line. A word said in the wrong tone. Small things. Things that, on their own, shouldn't have the power to destroy your entire day. And yet they did. That's not weakness of character. That's not you being too sensitive. That's the absence of a tool that has existed for over 2,000 years, and that most people have never truly had access to. That tool is called Stoicism. But before you think I'm going to sit here throwing philosopher quotes at you and telling you to be strong, stop. This video is not about that. This video is about 5 concrete habits, tested across centuries, that when you incorporate them into your life, not as theory but as daily practice, they change the way you think, the way you react, and who you become. If you made it here, you're probably tired of reacting to everything, tired of being moved by circumstances, tired of feeling like life happens to you, not for you. Stay with me until the end. Because what comes next will make sense in a way that goes beyond words. And if this touches something inside you, subscribe to the channel. Because here we don't sell motivation. We use Stoicism as a practical tool to live with more clarity, more calm, and more strength. Let's begin. Habit 1. Master what you control and release the rest. Let me tell you something that seems obvious, but that almost no one actually practices. There is a line, an invisible line that divides everything in your life into 2 groups. On one side, the things that depend on you. On the other, the things that don't. Sounds simple, right? But most human suffering, the anxiety, the anger, the frustration, is born from one single confusion. We spend energy trying to control what we have no way of controlling. And we end up exhausted, irritated, and with the feeling that life is unfair. Most people believe they need to control everything to feel safe. Control what others think. Control how situations unfold. Control the outcomes. And then, when something slips out of control, and it always will, the world falls apart. Here's what almost no one notices. You were never taught to separate what is yours from what isn't. Nobody taught you this. School didn't, family didn't, and society does the opposite. It encourages you to worry about everything all the time. This is where Stoicism changes everything. The Stoics called this the dichotomy of control. In simple terms, focus on what depends on you, your choices, your reactions, your values, and accept with serenity what does not. Epictetus was a slave, literally. A man who didn't even control his own body. His master could beat him, sell him, do whatever he wanted. And yet Epictetus became one of the greatest philosophers in history. Why? Because he discovered that even without controlling anything around him, he controlled one thing: how he responded to what happened to him. He said, and this changes everything, "It is not things that disturb men, but the judgments they make about things. Think about that. It wasn't the traffic that stressed you out. It was the meaning you gave to the traffic. It wasn't the unanswered message that made you anxious. It was what you imagined that message meant. Now I need you to think of something that stole your peace today. It can be big or small. Something you didn't say, a situation that didn't go as planned, a person who did something that bothered you. Now answer me honestly. Was that thing under your control? Not the outcome, not the other person's reaction, not what happened after, just your initial action. Was that under your control? In most cases, the answer is partially. You controlled your part. The rest, you didn't. And here's the objection I know you might be thinking, but isn't this just accepting everything? Rolling over for anything? No, that's the biggest misunderstanding about Stoicism. Acceptance is not surrender. Acceptance is stopping the waste of energy, fighting what cannot be changed, and redirecting that energy toward what you can actually do. An archer doesn't control the wind. He controls his posture, his breath, the angle of the bow. He does everything within his reach. And then he releases the arrow. The result will depend on many things. But the archer who acts this way sleeps soundly because he knows he did his part. That is the habit. Every morning, before the day begins, ask yourself one question: what is within my control today? And focus on that. Only that, complaints decrease, anxiety decreases, and action, real action, increases. Repeat this to yourself silently as a commitment. I focus on what depends on me. The rest I accept with serenity. Habit 2. Use emotions as information, not as commands. Here's the thing. Have you noticed that in the moments you regret most, the moments when you said something you shouldn't have, made a decision that hurt you, reacted in a way that embarrassed you afterward, in almost all of those moments, you were being commanded by an emotion? Anger, fear, jealousy, insecurity, anxiety. And the problem isn't that you felt those emotions. The problem is what you did with them. Most people grew up believing one of two lies. The first, emotions are weakness, so you need to suppress them, pretend you don't feel them, be tough. The second, emotions are truth, so you need to follow them, act on them, let them guide you. Both are wrong, and both come at a high cost. Suppressing emotions doesn't eliminate them. They come back stronger in worse moments. And blindly obeying emotions is like letting a 5-year-old drive your car. They might be feeling something real, but they don't have the maturity to make complex decisions. Stoicism proposes a third way. Observe the emotion. Don't suppress it, don't obey it, observe it. Marcus Aurelius, who was emperor of Rome, the most powerful man in the world in his time, wrote every night. Not for posterity, for himself. It was his way of observing what he was feeling, naming it, and deciding how to respond. On one of those nights, after a day of betrayal and conspiracy inside his own palace, he wrote, "When you wake in the morning, think today I will meet intrusive, ungrateful, arrogant, dishonest, envious, and unsocial people. All these qualities arise from ignorance of what is good and what is evil." He wasn't being naive. He was preparing himself. He was choosing his response before being provoked. Let me tell you about a man named Raphael. Raphael was 34 years old, held a leadership position at a mid-sized company, and had a temper he himself described as explosive. Every time someone on his team made a mistake, he reacted immediately. Raised voice, harsh words, and afterward, invariably, a feeling of shame that lasted for days. He knew anger was a problem, but he thought it was just who he was, that he couldn't change, until the day a colleague he deeply respected handed in his resignation. And in the resignation letter he wrote, "You are the most competent leader I've ever had, and the hardest to work with, because I never know when you're going to explode." That stopped Raphael, not the anger itself, but the cost of it. He began practicing something simple. Whenever he felt the anger rising, with that heat in his chest, that tension in his jaw, he took 3 breaths before saying anything. Just 3 breaths. At first it seemed ridiculous. Then it started working, because the 3 breaths created a space. And in that space, he could choose his response instead of just reacting. This is what the Stoics called the pause, the space between stimulus and response. Seneca wrote, "We suffer more in imagination than in reality." Raphael's anger wasn't caused by his employee's mistake. It was caused by the meaning he gave the mistake. This is disrespect. I lose control when things don't go my way. This makes me look weak. When he began to question those meanings, the anger still came. But it brought information, not commands. It said, "Something here bothers you," not "explode now." The habit is this: when a strong emotion arises, name it. Say internally, "This is anger, this is fear, this is insecurity." Naming the emotion creates automatic distance. You stop being the emotion and become the one who observes it. And then the question changes. From what do I feel? To what do I want to do with what I feel? That shift, small, invisible, silent, is one of the most transformative that exists. I observe my emotions. They inform me, but I am the one who decides. Habit 3. Practice voluntary adversity. This is the habit that surprises people the most when they first hear it, and also the one that transforms the most when put into practice. The Stoics practice something called premeditatio malorum, which translates directly to the premeditation of evils. Before you think this is pessimism, or that it's about sitting around imagining bad things to suffer over, stop. It's the exact opposite. Most people avoid thinking about worst-case scenarios. That makes sense. It's uncomfortable. We want to believe everything will work out, that the job will continue, that the health will hold, that the people we love will be here tomorrow. And then when something changes, and something always changes, the fall is brutal. Because you weren't prepared, not emotionally. The Stoic does it differently. He imagines the loss before it happens. Not to suffer, for 2 reasons. First, to realize he can endure more than he thinks. Second, to begin valuing what he has while he still has it. Marcus Aurelius had a daily practice. Before sleeping, he would think, what if I lost this tomorrow? Not with anguish, with curiosity, like a quiet preparation. But there's a second element of this habit that goes beyond visualization. It's voluntary adversity in practice. The Stoics didn't just imagine discomfort, they sought it deliberately. Seneca would spend a few days each month sleeping on the floor, eating only the basics, wearing simple clothing. Not because he was poor, because he wanted to remember that if everything went away, he would survive. That his well-being didn't depend on comfort. Look, I'm not asking you to sleep on the floor, but I need to ask you, what discomfort have you been avoiding? It might be a difficult conversation you keep postponing, a workout you skip when it rains, a task you procrastinate because it will be hard, a change you put off because it's frightening. Every discomfort you avoid strengthens the habit of avoiding. And every time you face a discomfort voluntarily, by choice, not by obligation, you train something far more important than the task itself. You train the ability to act even when you don't want to. Let me tell you about Anna. Anna was 29 years old and had a fear that controlled much of her life, the fear of not being enough. That fear showed up in different ways. She wouldn't send the resume because the profile didn't quite fit, wouldn't publish the project because it wasn't ready, yet wouldn't speak in meetings because someone more experienced would talk anyway. One day she read about the Stoic practice of voluntary discomfort and decided to apply it simply. Every week she would do one thing that made her uncomfortable, not necessarily big, just uncomfortable. In the first week, she sent an email to someone she admired professionally asking for a conversation. Her heart raced for hours before she hit send. The person replied. They scheduled a coffee. In the second week, she spoke in a meeting even without being sure what she was going to say was good enough. Nobody laughed. 2 people agreed. It wasn't that the world became perfect. It was that Anna began to realize that the discomfort she feared was almost always smaller than she imagined, and that on the other side of discomfort, there was growth. The Stoics knew that the comfort zone is not a safe place. It is a place of slow decay, because everything that is not tested weakens. The habit is to choose one voluntary discomfort per week. Something you've been avoiding, and go. Not when you're ready. You'll never be ready now. And when you come back, the question isn't, how did it go? The question is, what did I learn about myself? I seek discomfort before it finds me. That is how I grow. Habit 4. Live in complete alignment with your values. Here's what almost no one notices about unhappiness. When most people feel empty, Anxious or without purpose, they look for the cause outside. In the job that doesn't satisfy, in the relationship that doesn't work, in the money that's lacking, in the life that didn't turn out as planned. And sometimes those things are real problems. But there's a very specific kind of suffering that doesn't come from any of those places. It comes from within. And it's one of the most silent and exhausting kinds that exists. That suffering has a name. Value dissonance. It's what happens when you live in a way that contradicts what you believe to be right. When you act out of fear of judgment instead of conviction. When you say yes when you want to say no. When you pursue goals that aren't yours, that belong to your father, your mother, society, social media, and treat them as if they were your own ambition. The Stoics called it living according to virtue. And virtue for them wasn't about religious morality or correct behavior. It was about aligning your actions with what you, at the deepest level, recognize as right. The thing is, most people have never stopped to ask what they actually value. They live on autopilot, following scripts written by other people. Let me tell you about a man named Cato of Utica. Cato was a Roman senator who lived during the time of Julius Caesar. While everyone around him yielded, made concessions, traded principles for power or safety, Cato was known for one thing: he never yielded. Not out of stubbornness, out of conviction. He had absolute clarity about what he valued: the republic, freedom, honesty, and no external pressure could move that. Caesar, his political enemy, once said, "Cato is the only free man in Rome." The most powerful man of the era, acknowledging that real power wasn't in armies, in money, in position. It was in the integrity of someone who knew exactly who they were. Now the practical question: how do you discover your real values? Not the values you think you should have, yours. One method the Stoics used was the deathbed vision exercise. Imagine you're at the end of your life looking back. What, if left undone, would leave you with genuine regret? Not the regret of not having made more money. The regret of not having been present with the people you loved. Of not having had the courage to be who you truly were. Of having lived the life others expected of you instead of your own. Those regrets, they point to your real values, and once you find them, the next step is both the hardest and the most liberating. Aligning your daily choices with those values, not in grand gestures. In the small decisions of every single day, you make that phone call you've been putting off to the person who matters to you. You say no to the commitment that goes against what you believe. You do the work with the care it deserves, not just enough to get by. Each choice like that isn't just an action. It's a declaration of who you are, and when your actions and your values align, even when life stays difficult, even when things don't go as planned, there's a peace that doesn't come from outside. A peace that doesn't depend on approval, on outcomes, on conditions. Epictetus said, "No man is free who is not master of himself." And being master of yourself starts with knowing who you are and living accordingly. Tonight, before you sleep, write one thing down, on paper, on your phone, anywhere. Write, what are the 3 most important values of my life? And tomorrow, throughout the day, observe, do your choices reflect those values? That simple observation changes everything. I live according to what I believe. My peace comes from within, not from outside. Habit 5. Practice. Memento Mori. Live as if for the last time. This last habit is the deepest and the most misunderstood. Memento Mori. In Latin, remember that you will die. Before you decide that's morbid or depressing, I need you to listen carefully. Because this practice, truly understood, is not about death. It's about life. Here's the thing. Most people live as if they have unlimited time, as if tomorrow is guaranteed, as if the conversation you postponed can wait, as if the project you dream about can be started later, as if the embrace you could have given is still coming, and then life passes, not dramatically with a great loss or a clear turning point. It passes in small postponements, in the laters, in the when I have times, in the next years. And one day you look back and realize you lived in the future, never in the present. The Stoics used Memento Mori not to become depressed, but to wake up, to give the present the weight it deserves. Marcus Aurelius wrote something that is one of the most powerful things I've ever read. He who does not value life does not deserve it. And he knew what he was talking about. He governed a crumbling empire, watched children die, friends betray him, wars that never ended. He had every reason in the world to live in the future, waiting for the next victory, the next relief, the next stability, and he chose to live now. Let me tell you about Maria. Maria was 52 years old when she received a diagnosis that changed everything. I won't go into details. What matters is what she told me afterward. She said, "The diagnosis didn't scare me. What scared me was realizing when I thought I might not have much time, how much I had postponed. Trips, conversations, apologies, things I thought I could do later." She went through treatment. She recovered. But she didn't return to the life she had before. She was deliberately different. She stopped postponing, not the big things, the small ones. The call to her mother that lasted 2 minutes and she kept putting off for days. The text to the friend who had drifted away that she kept thinking she didn't know what to write. The personal project she didn't have time to touch. She said, "I learned that time is not something you have. It's something you use." Memento Mori is not about living in a rush. It's not about doing everything with urgency or anxiety. It's about a different quality of attention. It's looking at the person in front of you and actually being there. It's doing the work carefully because this moment will not repeat itself. It's saying what needs to be said because you don't know if you'll have another chance, Seneca wrote, and this still resonates today. Set yourself apart from the crowd and keep close whatever time remains to you. Guard it and think about how you spend it. The practical habit is simple. Once a day, in the morning or before sleeping, you ask yourself, if I knew today was my last day, what would I change about how I live it? Not to create anxiety, to create presence. You don't need to change everything. Just pay real attention to something you normally do on autopilot, the conversation at dinner, the road you walk, the work you deliver, the person you meet. This is the simplest habit and the most revolutionary, because it doesn't change what you do. It changes how you are while doing it. And when you live this way, present, conscious, aligned, you discover what the Stoics already knew. A full life is not an achievement. It's a choice, made every day, in each small and ordinary moment. I live now completely, because this moment does not return. So let's remember the 5 habits that transform your life and make you unstoppable. First, master what you control and release with serenity what you don't. Second, use emotions as information, not as commands. Observe before reacting. Create the space between stimulus and response. Third, seek discomfort voluntarily, because growth lives on the other side of discomfort. Fourth, live in complete alignment with your values, because real peace doesn't come from outside. It comes from the coherence between what you believe and what you do. Fifth, practice Memento Mori. Remember that time is finite. so you can live each moment with more presence, more care, more intention. This is not a perfect life. No Stoic philosopher promised a life without pain, without loss, without challenge. What Stoicism promises and delivers is a life that pain does not control, a life that challenges do not break, a life lived from the inside out. Before you leave this video, I want to ask you one last question. Of the 5 habits we talked about today, mastering what you control, observing your emotions, seeking discomfort, living by your values, being present, which one do you feel you need to work on the most right now? Not the one that seems easiest. The one that you feel if you started today would change something important in your life. Write it in the comments. Not for me, for you. Because the act of writing is the first step of a real commitment. And I want to read what you write. If this video reached you in a way that made sense, subscribe to the channel. Because every week we go deeper into this, not in theory, in practice. In how you use Stoicism to actually live better. Leave a like too. It helps this content reach more people who need to hear this. And remember, every day I am becoming stronger, calmer, and wiser. Until next time.